I almost didn't go that day. That's the thing I keep coming back to. I'd been in London for 4 days already, tired, a little sunburned from an afternoon near the Thames, and honestly ready to just sit somewhere quiet with a coffee and stop walking. My feet were done, my camera battery was low, and my friend Sophie kept saying, "Come on, it'll just be a quick look. Nothing's probably even happening." So we went, because that's what you do in London when someone says that. You go anyway. It was a Tuesday morning in late spring, and the air had that particular quality it gets in England, when the weather can't quite commit to anything. Not warm, not cold, just this soft, gray brightness that makes everything look slightly more serious than it probably is. We'd come up through St. James's Park, on past the pelicans that were doing absolutely nothing interesting despite everyone photographing them, and the moment we turned the corner toward the palace, I noticed the crowd. Not a tourist crowd. That's the first thing you clock when you've been around London long enough. Tourist crowds move differently. They cluster and drift and take photos of things that aren't ready yet. This crowd was still, facing one direction, and it was 3 or 4 people deep already, pressed against the metal barriers with that particular tension in their shoulders that means something is about to happen, and we all know it. Sophie grabbed my arm. "Something's going on," she said, like I couldn't see that. We found a spot near the edge of the barrier, about 40 meters back from the main gate. I'm not tall, and I was standing on my toes before I'd even consciously decided to. Around us, people were speaking in 6 languages, all in that hushed register people use when they're trying not to miss something. A woman next to me had a small British flag she'd clearly bought from a street vendor minutes ago. The plastic crinkle of it was still loud when she shifted her grip. An older man had a camera with a lens so long it looked like he was prepared to photograph something on the moon. A palace staff member, a young woman with a radio clipped to her jacket, was moving along the inside of the barrier, and someone called out to her, "What's happening? Is it the princess?" She smiled in a way that said, "Yes," without saying yes. Just that small, contained smile, and kept walking. The murmur that went through the crowd after that, I can't really describe it. It wasn't excitement exactly. It was something quieter than excitement. More like the feeling before a piece of music you love begins. When the hall goes dark, and you know it's coming, and there's this collective inhale that isn't quite sound. I checked my camera. 11% battery. I turned to Sophie. "This better be worth it," I said. She wasn't listening. She was already looking toward the gate. The wait was maybe 20 minutes. Long enough that some people near us gave up and left. Long enough that my feet, which were already unhappy, graduated to genuinely resentful. The older man with the enormous camera lens had shifted position 3 times and was now at a slightly better angle than me, which was annoying in a way I completely understood. The guards at the gate were doing what they always do, which is absolutely nothing in the most disciplined way imaginable. I've always found something almost hypnotic about that, the way they hold themselves like they've decided, completely and permanently, to simply be there. No fidgeting, no glancing around, just presence. It's eerie if you think about it too long. I was thinking about it, which meant I almost missed the moment the energy in the crowd shifted again. A ripple, starting near the front and moving back through the people like something you'd see in water. Then I heard it, the sound of a vehicle on the internal drive, slow and deliberate. Not a speeding motorcade, not sirens, just the unhurried sound of something important taking its time. Sophie made a sound that wasn't quite a word. The woman with the plastic flag had stopped crinkling it entirely. And then the doors. There's a thing that happens when you see someone famous in person for the first time. Someone you've only ever seen in photographs or on screens. And it's not quite what you expect. It's more disorienting than you think it will be, because your brain keeps trying to reconcile the image it already has with the actual dimensions of a real person, standing in real light. It takes a second, 2 seconds sometimes. And in that gap between recognition and reality, something strange happens. They become more human, not less. More ordinary looking in a way that makes them more interesting, not less important. I'd seen photographs of them 100 times, 1,000 maybe. You can't live in the world and not have seen those photographs. But standing there, on 11% camera battery, sore feet, bad angle. The moment William and Catherine appeared at the top of those steps, I understood why 20 strangers around me had stood perfectly still for 20 minutes waiting. It wasn't the clothes. It wasn't any of the formal things. It was the way they were looking at each other. I've been to a few official events in my life. A state ceremony once, years ago, when I was covering local news for a regional paper that no longer exists. I remember the feeling of those occasions, the deliberate choreography of them, every gesture calculated, every expression managed. People in public life learn a particular kind of face, a public face. You can see it operating like a second skin if you look for it. The eyes stay pleasant and distant. The smile sits slightly in front of the actual feelings. I was looking for that face when William and Catherine came down the steps. I didn't find it. That's what stopped me. That's what stopped, I think, almost everyone around me. She was wearing something pale. A coat, I think, though I was at enough of a distance that I couldn't have told you the precise color with certainty. Something soft. Her hair was down, and the gray-white morning light caught it in a way that made her look simultaneously very formal and very tired, in a human way that had nothing to do with appearance. The kind of tired that lives behind the eyes when someone has been carrying something for a long time and is still carrying it, standing straight. He was half a step behind her and then beside her. One of those adjustments that happens so naturally between two people who have moved through spaces together for years. You don't think about it. Your body just does it. He was in a dark coat, dark enough that the morning absorbed some of him, and he was looking at her with an expression I found very difficult to categorize. Not sad, exactly. Not the performed gravity of a formal occasion. Something more specific than sadness. I think what it was, and I've thought about this since because I've thought about that morning a lot, was tenderness held carefully. Like when you're carrying something fragile and you know you can't set it down, so you adjust your grip and keep going. That's what his face looked like. Someone adjusting their grip. The woman next to me, the one with the flag, made a very small sound. Not a gasp. Just a soft exhale, the kind that happens when something lands somewhere in your chest before your brain has processed it. They moved toward the barrier, slowly. The pace of someone who isn't hurrying because the moment is the thing, not the destination at the end of it. There were officials. There are always officials at these things, moving with the careful peripheral energy of people whose job it is to be present without being noticed. A man with a program of some kind. Someone with an earpiece. But they existed at the edges of what was happening, not inside it. Because what was inside it was the two of them, side by side, and the particular gravity that seemed to exist in the space between them. Catherine stopped at one point to speak with a woman who had clearly been standing at the front of the barrier for a very long time, the kind of patient, determined positioning that takes hours, not minutes. She was older, 70s maybe. She had flowers, actual flowers, wrapped in paper, which people don't always bring anymore, and something about the analog nature of them, the slight wilt at the edges, made them feel more sincere than something bought that morning would have done. I couldn't hear what was said. Nobody near me could. But I could see Catherine lean in, not a formal lean, not the managed half-tilt of an official interaction, but a genuine lean, the kind where you actually want to hear the person. and something was exchanged. Words. Maybe more than words. The older woman put her hand over her mouth briefly afterward, which is a gesture that means something got through. Sophie was holding her own hand at this point, just holding it, pressed between her palms like she was trying to keep something warm. "Are you okay?" I asked her. "No, don't talk to me right now," she said, but kindly. What happened next? The part that I think is why I'm still thinking about it. Months later, standing in my kitchen in the morning sometimes, and just thinking about it, happened in the brief space between two official obligations. There's always a schedule at these things, a program, a next thing to get to. You can feel it operating even when you can't see it. A subtle current in the movement of the people around the principals, a slight gathering of intention that means we need to move along now. I'd been around enough of these to recognize the current. But the current paused. I don't know who decided it. I don't know if anyone decided it. Sometimes things just happen in the gap between one choreographed moment and the next. And this was one of those. William put his hand on her back. That's all. Just his hand. Low on her back. The kind of contact that says, "I'm here," without needing to say it at all. And she turned. Not all the way. Just a partial turn. The kind that happens when two people are in conversation with themselves in the middle of a crowd, and the crowd momentarily ceases to be real. And she looked up at him. And he looked at her. I took a photograph. The camera was at 7% by then, and I took the photograph anyway. And I'm glad, because I have it. And when I look at it, it still does the same thing to me it did in person. Makes something tighten in my throat for a reason I can't fully explain. It was maybe 3 seconds. 4, at the outside. But here is the thing about 3 or 4 seconds, when the right two people are looking at each other in the right way. A crowd of strangers can feel it like weather. It moves through you. It doesn't ask permission. The woman with the flag had stopped breathing, I think. The man with the enormous camera had lowered it slightly. Nobody took a single photograph in those 3 or 4 seconds. I don't think anyone wanted to interrupt it. I want to be careful here, because it's easy to project. It's easy, especially in a crowd, especially when you're already emotionally primed by the atmosphere of a thing, to read meanings into ordinary gestures, to turn a moment into a symbol of something it isn't. I've seen enough of that in the years I spent writing about public events. So the human brain is extraordinarily good at building stories from small signals, and it doesn't always get the story right. So I want to be honest. I don't know exactly what they were feeling. I don't have access to that. Nobody in that crowd did. But I know what I saw. And what I saw was a farewell. Not in any dramatic, declared sense. There was no announcement. Nobody in the crowd had been told to expect this. But there's a quality to certain moments of parting between people who love each other, a particular quality that is distinct from all other human interactions. And when you witness it, even at a distance, even through the slightly inadequate lens of a camera running on 7% battery, you know it for what it is. He said something to her. I could see his mouth move. Whatever it was short. 1 sentence, maybe 2. The kind of thing you say when you've already said everything else in private. And this is just the last small word before the public world reassumption. She nodded. Not the performative nod of an official engagement. The private nod of someone receiving something meant for them alone. Her chin dipped once, came back up, and when it came back up, her expression had changed in a way I can't precisely describe, except to say it was the expression of someone deciding to be fine. Anyone who has ever had to decide to be fine will recognize it. And then he stepped closer, and she turned into him. There's no other word for it. She turned into him, the way you turn into shelter. And his arms came around her. And for a moment that felt longer than it probably was. The Princess of Wales and the man who would be king stood in front of 100 strangers, and weren't thinking about any of them. The sound the crowd made was not a cheer. I want to be precise about that, because cheers are common at these things. Cheers are expected. Cheers are the appropriate response to a royal appearance, and everyone present knows it and deploys them at the right moment, like a social punctuation. A cheer is a public thing, communal and declarative, saying we are all here, and we see you, and we approve. This wasn't that. This was smaller and stranger and more personal. A collective exhale, almost. The kind of sound a group of people makes when they simultaneously recognize something true. It started near the front of the crowd, a soft sound, almost involuntary, like 30 people quietly drawing breath at the same moment, and it moved back through the group in a wave. Sophie actually said quietly, "Oh," just that. "Oh," like a word she hadn't decided to say. The woman with the flag was crying, not dramatically, just 2 lines of moisture running parallel down her face, and she wasn't doing anything about them, which meant she either didn't notice or didn't care. She was still looking toward the gate with the precise, focused attention of someone memorizing something. The man with the large camera had put it completely down at some point. I don't know when. His hands were at his sides. A child near the front, maybe 7 years old, in a bright yellow jacket that made her easy to spot, had been restless all morning, the way children are restless when adults make them stand still for long periods. Fidgeting, tugging at her mother's sleeve, asking questions I was too far away to hear. But she'd gone still. Just watching, the way children watch things that they don't have words for, yet but no matter. I thought about that afterward, the way children sometimes perceive the emotional weight of moments before they can name them. She had no idea why the crowd had gone quiet. She just knew it had, and she went quiet with it. It lasted, the embrace, the held moment, the thing the crowd was witnessing. Perhaps 5 seconds, perhaps 8. Time at moments like that is genuinely unreliable. My brain was not keeping good count. When they separated, there was a brief pause, the kind of pause that exists in the charged space immediately after something emotionally significant, or when both people are finding their way back to the public version of themselves. A breath, a small adjustment of position, and then Catherine straightened, that particular straightening that is both physical and psychological, the spine lengthening, the face rearranging itself into something ready for the rest of the day. But her eyes, for just a moment before the adjustment was complete, were bright in a way that had nothing to do with the morning light. William touched her hand briefly. Not a held hand, just a touch. The kind of small reassurance you give someone that says "still here" without making a production of it. She smiled at him. It was a real smile, not a public one, and I know the difference because everyone does. Because that particular distinction is one of the things we evolved to read in each other's faces before we had language for it. He smiled back in a way that was smaller than hers, but went deeper. And then the current resumed. The officials gathered. The program reasserted itself. They turned toward the next obligation, and the crowd, which had been absolutely, collectively still for however long it had been, exhaled together and began to shift and move and take photographs again. "Did you get it?" Sophie said. "Some of it," I said. "That was—" She stopped. Started again. I wasn't expecting that. Neither was I. And I don't think any of us were, which is, I've come to think, exactly why it mattered. We didn't leave right away. That's another thing I remember. After they'd moved on, after the event continued past the part we could see, after the officials redistributed themselves toward whatever came next on the program, most of the crowd didn't immediately dissolve. People stood around for a while, not for any particular reason, not waiting for anything else, just standing, The way you stand at the end of a concert for a moment before you find your coat. The woman with the flag was still there. She dried her face with the back of her hand and was talking to the man beside her. Her husband, I assumed, from the easy way they occupied space next to each other. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but she was still holding the flag, and she was smiling now, in the way people smile when they're recounting something to someone who was also there. The man with the large camera was looking at his screen, reviewing footage or photographs, his expression the careful, focused look of a professional assessing material. But he stopped at one point and just looked, just held the camera and looked at the screen in a way that had nothing to do with technical assessment. The little girl in the yellow jacket was asking her mother something, tugging at her sleeve again. The mother crouched down and answered her at eye level, the way good parents answer questions when they want to be taken seriously. And the girl listened with the particular intensity of a child receiving information they've decided matters. I wondered what she said. What do you tell a 7-year-old about what they just witnessed? How do you explain why a crowd went quiet? Why strangers cried? Or why a 5-second embrace between two people held 100 people motionless? I'm not sure I could have explained it to myself, honestly. Not then. Not cleanly. Sophie and I walked back through the park afterward. We bought coffee from a cart near the bridge. The kind of slightly too expensive park coffee that you buy anyway, because the moment calls for it. And we sat on a bench for a while and didn't talk much. That happens sometimes after something affects you. The words feel inadequate for a while, and the best thing is to just let the feeling sit without trying to immediately convert it into language. After maybe 10 minutes, Sophie said, "I keep thinking about her face." After he hugged her. Yeah, when she was deciding. I knew exactly what she meant without needing more than that. The moment I'd thought of as deciding to be fine. Sophie had seen it too, from her angle, and had landed on the same word internally without knowing I'd used it. There's something about watching people be private in public, I said, eventually. Even briefly. It does something. Sophie turned her coffee cup in her hands. It's because you're not supposed to see it. So when you do, yeah, she nodded. We left it there, which felt right. I've thought about why that moment stayed with me. I've thought about it the way you think about something that lodged somewhere without asking permission. Not obsessively, just returning to it in quiet moments. On the tube home that evening, in the days afterward, when I was back in my regular life doing regular things. I think it's this. Most of what we see in public life is managed, ununderstandably so, necessarily so. There are good reasons why people who live in the public eye develop the public face I described earlier. It's a form of self-protection, a reasonable adaptation to a genuinely unusual circumstance. And most of us have made a kind of implicit agreement with that reality. We watch the managed version, and we understand. That's the version on offer, and we adjust our expectations accordingly. So when the management slips, not in a scandalous way, not dramatically, but just briefly, because two people are standing near each other, and one of them needs to say something real before the next thing begins. It lands with a force that's disproportionate to the size of the moment. Because it's real. Unmistakably, undeniably real. And real things, amid all the managed ones, can hit you somewhere that the managed ones can't reach. What I saw that morning wasn't spectacle. It wasn't performance. It was two people who clearly, genuinely love each other, doing what people who genuinely love each other do when they have to keep going, holding on for a moment, and then letting go, and then going. There's a particular quality to the kind of love that holds steady through difficulty. Not the easy love of good times. That kind is common, and it's good, but it doesn't carry the same specific gravity. The kind I mean is the love that shows up in the face of someone who is scared and tired and carrying things they can't put down, but who turns toward their person with their whole body. The love that touches the back of someone's hand for one quiet second and means everything by it. I've seen it in ordinary places, in hospitals, in train stations, in parking lots, at the end of difficult days. I've seen it in my own life and in the lives of people I love. It is one of the few things that remains identifiable across every difference of circumstance or culture or background. You know it when you see it, whether it's happening in a kitchen or in front of a palace. That's what the crowd saw that morning, I think. That's why the woman cried. That's why the man put the camera down. That's why a child who'd been fidgeting for 40 minutes went completely still. Not because they were famous, not because of the history or the institution or the weight of everything those two people represent and carry, but because for 5 or 8 seconds, in a space between official moments, two human beings showed each other something true. And in a world where true things are hard to come by, a crowd of strangers stopped talking and stood together in the soft gray light and simply witnessed it. I have the photograph. I look at it sometimes when I need reminding. 7% battery was enough. It turns out 7% is always enough when the right moment arrives.